The day my son called to tell me he wouldn't be coming to his mother's retirement celebration. I was standing in the kitchen holding a spatula, stirring a pot of her favorite gumbo. 40 years. That's how long Eleanor had worked at Riverside Elementary. 40 years of early mornings, of lesson plans spread across the dining room table every Sunday night, of parent-teacher conferences that ran so long I'd fall asleep in the car waiting for her. And when they finally threw her retirement party, the real one, with the gym decorated and the kids who'd grown into adults coming back just to see her, my son Nathan called me 2 hours before it started and said he had a conflict. A conflict. I turned off the stove. I set the spatula down very carefully on the counter. I asked him to repeat himself. Dad, I'm sorry. I really am. Melissa got these tickets to the Braves game months ago, and you know how hard they were to get, and we already made plans with her brother and his wife, and I can't cancel on them now. It would be a whole thing. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was looking at the pot of gumbo on the stove, the one I'd been making since 6 that morning because Eleanor always said mine was better than any restaurant's. I'd made it for her. For her day. Nathan, I said, your mother worked 40 years for this. I know, Dad. Tell her I said happy retirement. I'll take her out to dinner next week, I promise. Somewhere nice. I hung up the phone. I didn't tell Eleanor right away. I watched her get ready in our bedroom, putting on the blue dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion, asking me twice if her earrings matched. She was nervous in the way she always got before big moments, fidgeting, smoothing the front of her dress, checking the mirror one more time even when she looked perfect. I told her she looked beautiful. She did. It wasn't until we were in the car pulling out of the driveway that she asked where Nathan was meeting us. I told her the truth. She didn't cry. That's what broke my heart. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, the way you nod when something confirms what you already suspected. And she turned to look out the passenger window and she said, okay. Just that one word. Okay. We went to the party without him. You have to understand something about Nathan. He wasn't always like this. When he was small, he was the kind of kid who would bring Eleanor dandelions from the yard, clutched in a fist, proud as if they were roses. He'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework while she graded papers, just to be near her. In high school, he made honor roll every semester, and she drove him to debate tournaments 3 counties over without a single complaint. I traveled for work back then. I was a civil engineer, and there were stretches where I'd be on a site in Alabama or Tennessee for weeks at a time. Eleanor held everything together. She always did. Nathan got a scholarship to Georgia Tech. Mechanical engineering. We were so proud we couldn't see straight. Eleanor framed the acceptance letter and hung it in the hallway right next to his high school graduation photo. That's where it's still hanging. I haven't taken it down. I'm not sure why. The changes were gradual, the way they always are. You don't notice the slow things until one day you look up and realize the person in front of you is someone you barely recognize. He met Melissa his junior year. I have nothing against Melissa as a human being. I want to say that plainly. She is a capable woman. She is organized and ambitious and comes from a family that measures success in a very specific, very quantifiable way. Her father made a lot of money in real estate. Her mother chairs 3 different charity boards and manages to make volunteering feel like a competitive sport. They are the kind of people who don't say we can't afford it. They say that's not where we choose to allocate. When Nathan started using language like that, I figured it was just him growing up, becoming professional. When he stopped calling Eleanor on Sunday mornings the way he had since college, I figured he was busy. When he came home for Christmas and spent most of dinner talking about his firm's expansion plans and Melissa's promotion and the investment property they were looking at Buckhead, I figured that was just life. People get busy. People change their priorities. I kept figuring things. I kept making excuses. That's what you do when it's your child. The retirement party came and went, and it was wonderful despite everything. Eleanor's colleagues gave a speech that made her cry, and 3 of her former students showed up. One of them was now a pediatric nurse, and she told Eleanor that the reason she went into healthcare was because of a lesson Eleanor taught her in 3rd grade about taking care of people. I watched my wife stand there and receive all of that love, and I thought this woman deserved everything. She gave 40 years to other people's children, and she raised one of her own who didn't even show up. Nathan texted during the party a photo of himself and Melissa at Truist Park, cold beers in hand, smiling. The caption said, "Thinking of you guys. Tell Mom, congrats." I put my phone face down in my jacket pocket and didn't look at it again. Eleanor was diagnosed 14 months later. Early stage breast cancer. The doctor said the prognosis was good if she started treatment quickly, and she did. She was always the most disciplined person I knew. She went to every appointment. She did the radiation. She lost her hair and wore a blue headscarf that she managed to make look elegant, because that was Eleanor. I called Nathan the day of the diagnosis. He answered on the second ring, which surprised me. "How serious is it?" he asked. "Serious enough," I said. "She starts treatment next week. It would mean a lot to her if you came down." Silence on his end. I could hear Melissa's voice somewhere in the background asking a question I couldn't make out. "Dad, I'll be honest with you. Things are really hectic right now. We're in the middle of closing on the investment property, and Melissa's been dealing with some stuff at work, and I don't know if I can get away. But I'll call Mom. I'll call her tonight." "I'm not asking you to call her, Nathan. I'm asking you to come see her. Dad, she's your mother." He came. I'll give him that. He came about 3 weeks after she started treatment, and he stayed for one weekend, and he spent a significant portion of it on his laptop at the kitchen table, doing what he called catching up on some work. Eleanor sat across from him on Sunday morning in her blue headscarf, drinking the decaf the doctor had switched her to, watching him type, and she had a look on her face that I will not try to describe. I think you probably know what it looks like. I think if you're watching this, you might have seen that look on someone you love. He left Sunday afternoon. He hugged her at the door and said, "You're gonna beat this, Mom. You're the strongest person I know." And he meant it. I believe he meant it. And then he got in his car and drove back to Atlanta, and Eleanor stood in the doorway for a moment after the car disappeared around the corner. She beat it. 8 months of treatment, and the scans came back clean. We cried in the doctor's office, the two of us, holding hands across the armrest like we were on a first date. She called her sister. She called her 2 best friends from work. She called Nathan and left a voicemail because he didn't pick up. He texted back 2 hours later, "Amazing news. Mom, so relieved. Celebratory dinner soon?" 3 exclamation points. What I'm about to tell you is the part I've gone back and forth on whether to share. About a year after Eleanor's treatment ended, I retired. 36 years of civil engineering, bridges and overpasses, and drainage systems stretching across 4 states. My company gave me a lunch. My business partner of 22 years, a man named Clyde, gave a toast that went on so long the caterer started giving us looks. It was a good day. Eleanor and I started making plans. We talked about traveling. She'd always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest, and I wanted to spend some real time in New Orleans, not just passing through. We talked about the lake house. We'd owned a small place up in the North Georgia mountains for 20 years, mostly using it a few weekends a year. We'd always said that when we retired, we'd spend real time there. Nathan came to my retirement lunch. He came, he sat down, he was present and pleasant. And afterward, after Clyde's toast, after the cake, after Eleanor and I got in the car to drive home, I remember thinking, he's still my son. Whatever distance has grown between us, whatever Melissa's influence, whatever the money and the ambition and the life he's building have done to him, he's still in there. I hadn't given up. I should tell you about the money conversation, because it matters. About 6 months after my retirement, Nathan called me on a Tuesday afternoon, just out of the blue, which was already unusual. We talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular, the weather, some news story he'd seen, and then he got to it. He said he and Melissa had been talking about long-term family planning. He said they were looking at some investment opportunities that required some liquidity up front. He said, and I remember this phrase exactly, that it might be worth having a conversation about how the family assets are structured, and whether there was a smarter way to think about the transfer of wealth while I was still healthy and able to make those decisions intentionally. Transfer of wealth. I'm 63 years old, sitting in my home office with a cup of coffee, and my son is calling me to talk about transferring my wealth. I asked him what specifically he had in mind. He said the lake house, primarily. It had appreciated significantly, which it had. and there were tax advantages to transferring it now rather than later, and he and Melissa had actually already spoken to a financial advisor about it, and the advisor agreed that in my position, the smart move would be, "Nathan," I said. "Stop." He stopped. "Did you call me to ask for the lake house?" A pause. "Not to ask for it. To start a conversation about." "The lake house is where your mother spent the summer she was recovering from cancer," I said. "We sat on that porch every evening for 6 weeks. We played gin rummy. She read 11 novels. That house kept her sane, and it kept me sane. And I will decide what happens to it when I am good and ready, and I don't need your financial advisor's input on the matter." He apologized. He said I'd misunderstood his intentions. He said he was only trying to be helpful. We didn't talk about it again. But I didn't forget it. Eleanor got sick again in February. This time it wasn't breast cancer. This time it was her heart. A condition the cardiologist said had probably been developing for years. Quietly, the way serious things often do, she was hospitalized on a Thursday. I was with her when they admitted her. I called Nathan from the waiting room, standing under the fluorescent lights of Piedmont Hospital, watching people move through the corridor. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. I said, "Your mother is in the hospital. Please call me back." He called back 4 hours later. I was sitting in Eleanor's room by then, holding her hand while she slept, the monitor beeping its soft, steady rhythm. "How bad is it?" he asked. I told him what the doctor had said. I told him she was stable, but that they didn't know yet how much damage there was. I told him it was serious. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay, keep me posted and let me know if it gets worse. Let me know if it gets worse." I looked at Eleanor sleeping, her hand in mine, the blue hospital bracelet on her wrist. She had turned 62 in November. She had retired to spend time doing the things she loved. We had plans. We had the Pacific Northwest and New Orleans and all those evenings on the lake house porch still ahead of us. "Nathan," I said quietly because I didn't want to wake her, "I think you should come." "Dad, it's complicated right now. Melissa's firm is doing their annual review. It's the worst possible timing." "It was the worst possible timing for the retirement party too," I said. "And it was the worst possible timing when she was doing radiation." Silence. "There's never a good time for things like this," I said. "That's sort of the nature of them." He said he'd see what he could do. He did not come. Eleanor was in the hospital for 11 days. Her sister flew in from Memphis on day 2 and stayed for most of it. 2 of Eleanor's friends from Riverside Elementary came and brought food and sat with me in the waiting room and did not ask me anything about Nathan, because they were good people who understood that sometimes you don't ask. Clyde came twice. My neighbor brought a casserole. My son did not come. When Eleanor came home, and she did come home, moving slowly, carefully, the way people do when the body has reminded them of its limitations, she asked me once, just once, if Nathan had called. "Yes," I said. "He called." She nodded. That same nod. The one that confirmed what she already knew. She never mentioned it again. She passed on a Thursday morning in April. It was peaceful, which is what people say, and in this case it was actually true. She was home. I was with her. The hospice nurse had been wonderful. Eleanor had said everything she needed to say to the people she loved, and the weeks before, her sister, her friends, the former students she still kept up with. She'd even written notes. She was organized to the end. I called Nathan as soon as it was over. He answered this time. He cried. I believe his grief was real. I am not saying he didn't love his mother. I am saying that love without presence is a complicated thing, and the people in that house in those final weeks were not him. He flew in for the funeral. He sat in the front row beside me, in the dark suit and the appropriate expression, and people came up and offered condolences and told him what a remarkable woman his mother was. He said, "I know, and thank you," and she really was. He stayed for 2 days. He helped me sort through some paperwork. He was helpful and efficient and present in the practical ways. And on the morning of the 3rd day, he hugged me at the door and said, "Dad, I'm going to need you to start thinking about what you want to do with the house. No rush, but we should probably have that conversation soon." I looked at him for a long moment. "I just buried your mother, Nathan." I know. I'm not trying to pressure you. There are financial considerations, and Melissa and I have been talking. Leave, I said. He left. I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anyone. The week after the funeral, I sat alone in the house, the real house, the one Eleanor and I had lived in for 31 years. And I went through every room. I wasn't doing anything in particular. I was just being in the spaces where she had been. Her reading chair, the corner of the kitchen counter where she kept her tea, the closet where her clothes were still hanging the way she'd left them. I sat in her reading chair for about an hour. Then I called my attorney. I had drawn up a will years ago, the standard kind, everything to Eleanor, and if Eleanor predeceased me, to Nathan. I hadn't touched it since. It had seemed unnecessary, the kind of thing you do once and file away. I told my attorney I needed to make some changes. We met the following week. I came in with a list of organizations Eleanor had cared about, the literacy nonprofit she'd volunteered with for 15 years, a children's hospital fund she'd donated to every Christmas, the scholarship program at Riverside Elementary that sent kids who couldn't afford it to summer science camp. I knew all of them by heart because she'd talked about them for decades, because she'd given her own money to them when we had it to give. The lake house I left to her sister in Memphis. They'd spent 3 summers up there together during Eleanor's recovery, and her sister had never once had a vacation property of her own, and Eleanor would have wanted it that way. A portion I set aside for the grandchildren Nathan might have one day. Held in trust, not accessible until they turned 25. Managed by a trustee who was not Nathan or Melissa. And Nathan himself? I left him Eleanor's reading chair. Not as cruelty. Not as a statement. I left it to him because she loved that chair. And I wanted him to have something of hers, and I wanted it to be the thing that asked nothing of him financially and everything of him in terms of what it meant. My attorney asked if I was sure. I said I was sure. I didn't tell Nathan. I didn't call him up to announce it. I didn't send him a letter. I went back to living in my house, which felt very large and very quiet, and I started taking walks in the morning the way Eleanor had always encouraged me to do. I visited her sister in Memphis. I drove up to the lake house one weekend by myself and sat on the porch in the evening and watched the light go off the water, and I thought about her. 3 months later, I got a call from Nathan. He said he and Melissa had been doing some planning and wanted to sit down and talk about the estate. He was careful in how he said it, not pushy, not transactional, just practical. He said it might be good for all of us to get on the same page. I said that actually sounded fine, and I suggested we meet at my house the following Saturday. He came without Melissa, which surprised me. He sat across from me in the living room, in the chair that is not Eleanor's reading chair, and he looked like he was trying to be the kind of son he believed himself to be. There was something effortful about his composure. I noticed it. I told him I'd updated my will. I walked him through it plainly, the organizations, the children's hospital, the scholarship fund, the lake house going to his aunt. I told him about the grandchildren's trust, the age restriction, the independent trustee. I watched his face change as I talked, not dramatically. He was his mother's child in that way, in the ability to hold things inward. But I could see it. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Dad," he said finally, "I don't understand." "I think you do," I said. "All those years. Everything you and Mom built." "Everything your mother and I built," I said, "was built out of showing up. For each other. For you. For the people we loved, in the moments that mattered. That's what built it, not the money, not the property." He looked at his hands. "I loved her," he said. His voice was different now, younger somehow. "I know you did," I said. And I meant it. So did I. And I think that's why this hurts. Because loving someone and choosing them are 2 different things. She was in that hospital for 11 days, Nathan. She came home on hospice and she was there for 6 weeks. And every day of it she knew. He didn't have an answer for that. There isn't one. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing it because your mother spent her whole life choosing people. She chose her students. She chose her friends. She chose me every single day in ways I didn't always deserve. She would have wanted her life's work to go toward things that chose people back. Nathan left an hour later. He hugged me at the door, and I let him. And it was the realest moment we'd had in years. He's called a few times since. We talk. It's different than it was. Something has shifted in the way we move around each other, and I'm not sure it'll ever fully go back. But I'm not closed off to him. I'm not interested in permanent exile or dramatic estrangement. I'm 66 years old, and I've just lost the person I loved most in this world. And what I am interested in is exactly that, the world. The real one. The one made up of people who show up. I take my walks in the morning. I visit the lake house when I need to. Last month I volunteered for the first time at the literacy nonprofit, the one Eleanor gave her Saturdays to for 15 years. A young woman there, maybe 22, is learning to read for the first time as an adult. And she is so determined it makes you want to be better at everything. Eleanor would have loved her. I think about what my mother used to say when I was young and asked her how you know if someone really cares about you. She'd look at me and she'd say, "Baby, watch their feet, not their mouth. Watch where they go." I've been watching feet all my life. I'm not going to stop now. The reading chair is still in the corner. I asked Nathan to come get it last month. He said he would. He hasn't come yet. I'm in no hurry. I'll be here. I've been thinking a lot about what it actually means to love someone, not the feeling of it. The feeling is easy. Nathan loved his mother. I don't doubt that for a second. He cried at her funeral. He said the right things. He meant them, but meaning something and doing something about it are two entirely different muscles, and one of them he never trained. That's not a judgment. It's just what I've come to understand sitting in this house that's quieter than it's ever been. When Eleanor got sick the first time, I watched her fight with everything she had. She didn't complain. She didn't make it dramatic. She just put one foot in front of the other, day after day. And she did the hard thing because the hard thing was what was required. That's what I mean by resilience. Not strength for its own sake, but the kind that shows up specifically when it costs you something. When it would be so much easier not to. Nathan never learned that, and I think, if I'm being honest with myself, the way you have to be when there's no one else in the house to soften the truth, I think part of that is on me. On us. We made things easy for him for so long that he never had to develop the instinct to push through discomfort for someone else's sake. When the Braves' tickets conflicted with his mother's party, the discomfort of disappointing her was smaller than the discomfort of disappointing Melissa's family, so he chose the path of least resistance. He always did. That's not a character flaw you're born with. That's one that gets built, quietly, over years of small choices that nobody flags at the time. What I know now, what I wish I'd understood earlier, is that character is just the sum of what you do when nobody's grading you. When there's no obvious consequence either way. Nathan thought the consequence of not coming to that retirement party was a mildly disappointed mother who would forgive him by Tuesday. He was right about the forgiveness. He miscalculated what was being recorded. Not by me. Not deliberately. But by the situation itself. By life, which keeps a ledger whether you're paying attention or not. The money was never really the point of what I did. The lake house. The estate. The organizations I named. Those were all Eleanor's values made concrete. That's all a will really is when you think about it, a last statement about what you believed mattered. I wanted mine to say what she would have said. I wanted her voice in it. And Nathan has to live with what his choices said, not as punishment. I meant that when I told him, but consequences aren't punishment. They're just the shape that actions take when enough time has passed. He chose absence, repeatedly, at moments that asked for presence. And the absence compounded the way quiet things do, until it became the whole of something. What I hope, what I'm still holding on to, is that the reading chair means something to him eventually, that he comes to get it someday and sits in it and thinks about the woman who used to read in it for hours, who gave her whole life to choosing people, and that something in him decides to be more like her. That's the only inheritance that matters to me now. Not property. Not money. The question of what you decide to become when the person who loved you best is no longer around to make it easy. I'm still working on my own answer. I suspect that's the work of whatever years I have left.